Chapter 24. The Ultimate Test, Day 1. The four Unbreakables met by the flagpole before school. "Don't worry, Marisa," said Joy. "When you get sent back to kindergarten, I will still be your friend." "Thanks," said Marisa. "I know you'll do great. Nobody can jump rope like you can." "True," Joy agreed. "And Ron's memorized every page in the dictionary," said Dee Dee. Ron smiled. "Joy's a good speller, too," he pointed out. "You always get 100% on your spelling tests." "True," Joy agreed. "And one of Dee Dee's legs is shorter than the other," said Marisa. Dee Dee smiled. "Just lucky, I guess," she admitted. They locked thumbs and pinkies and shouted, "Unbreakable!" Marisa glanced up at the cloud of doom, then followed her friends into the school building. "I hope everyone's ready," Mrs. Jules greeted her class. "You just need to remember everything you've ever learned in your whole life." The children looked nervously around. The test would last 3 days. Each day would have several minor tests and one major event. On day 1, the major event was a spelling bee. "You mean we have to spell the words out loud?" asked Joy. "That's how a spelling bee works," said Mrs. Jules. Joy did a lot better when she could write the words. She was the master of fudge squiggles. If she didn't know the letter, she made a fudge squiggle that could have been any number or letter. Mrs. Jules always gave her the benefit of the doubt. All the children stood along the wall as they waited for their turns. If they missed a word, they would have to sit down. Mac couldn't spell curious. Leslie missed squawked. Jason went out on confidential. "Dilly-dally," said Mrs. Jules. "Dilly-dally," Todd repeated. He got every letter right, but left out the hyphen. "It's not even a letter," he protested when Mrs. Jules told him to sit down. Jenny missed skateboard. Joy was next. "Helicopter," said Mrs. Jules. "Helicopter," Joy repeated. "H-E-L." She was stuck. She didn't know if there was one or two L's, and she didn't know if the letter after that was an E or an I. If she could have written it, she could have made the perfect fudge squiggles to cover all the possibilities. She returned to her seat. Dee Dee was eliminated on eliminated. A short leg didn't help with spelling. After a while, only 3 students remained: John, Ron, and Marisa. "Spectacle," said Mrs. Jules. "Spectacle," John repeated. "Skeptical." He spelled skeptical instead of spectacle. Only Ron and Marisa remained. "Orchestra," said Mrs. Jules. Murmurs could be heard from around the room. Nobody thought Ron could do it. "Orchestra," Ron repeated, and then spelled it perfectly. "Vacuum," said Mrs. Jules. Marisa wasn't sure if there were 2 C's and 1 U or 2 U's and 1 C, but she guessed right. Mrs. Jules closed her dictionary. "Well, that's all the dictionary words," she announced. "I guess I'll have to use words that aren't in the dictionary." It was Ron's turn. "Thrubbledub," said Mrs. Jules. Ron had memorized the entire dictionary. How was he supposed to spell undictionary words? May I have the definition?" he asked. "It's when you count to 3 and fall asleep in the middle," said Mrs. Jules. "Oh, that's easy," Ron said, then correctly spelled the non-word. "Fudge squiggle," said Mrs. Jules. Marisa spelled it perfectly. She even included the hyphen, having learned from Todd's earlier mistake. "Wumph," said Mrs. Jules. Again, Ron asked for the definition. "It's the sound made by a jump rope as it brushes against the ground," explained Mrs. Jules. Ron gave it his best shot. "WHUMPH." "I'm sorry, Ron," said Mrs. Jules. "There are 2 M's in wumph." "I win!" Marisa exclaimed. The class cheered. Ron felt cheated. "It's a made-up word. Who gets to decide the number of M's?" Marisa's smile was big and bright. Ron was not smiling. Imagine if I gave you nonsense words on your spelling tests. That'd be tricky.